Boeing is disappointed. Welcome back, and today we're showing you the reason for the dispute between Boeing and China. Here we go. After three major Chinese airlines announced on Friday that they would purchase 292 planes from Airbus, public opinion in the United States appeared to turn negative. The order, worth more than $37 billion, is said to be one of Airbus's largest ever. According to Bloomberg, China is sending a signal, and it hurts Boeing tremendously. Boeing also expressed disappointment, claiming that geopolitical differences between the United States and China were hurting the company's business prospects and urging the governments to talk. If Washington believes that every deal signed by Chinese companies with foreign companies is motivated by political considerations, it only goes to show how serious Washington's recent practices of forcibly interfering in the economy and trade with politics have been, and how they have created an atmosphere in American business and public opinion circles that sees every brush and trees as enemy soldiers. Aviation's cooperation is in fact one of the three main pillars of China-Europe economic and trade cooperation. Airbus also has a factory in China, and surprisingly, they continue to advance cooperations, given their consistent and mature cooperations. According to analysts, this mega deal results from long and arduous negotiations. A collective order by three major airlines could help obtain a good deal. Furthermore, the fuel efficiency of Airbus planes and a weaker euro may influence the price. But overall, it's a standard business transaction that's difficult to criticize, and the outcome is also equal and mutually beneficial. It is natural for the American side to be disappointed after losing the competitions to Airbus. However, based on their global market performance, Airbus has been far ahead of Boeing in terms of competing for passenger plane orders and market share since 2019. On the one hand, this is partly due to safety concerns, as flights using Boeing 737 MAX aircraft have yet to resume in many countries. On the other hand, disruptions in US supply chains have severely harmed Boeing's delivery capacity, forcing the company to halt productions of 737 MAX passenger planes in May. According to sources, China's Southern Airlines canceled plans to purchase more than 100 Boeing planes earlier this year due to uncertainty over deliveries. In light of this, the US should examine its own government's actions rather than focusing on the motives of Chinese corporations. For example, who can be confident in engaging in large-scale trade with a country that frequently talks about decoupling, wields the stick of sanctions, and frequently introduces bills to restrict trade with others out of thin air, not to mention products such as planes, which have long life cycles, complex components, and necessitate professional maintenance. In many cases, such concerns are not even acts of state. Instead, it concerns the political risk various business entitles consider before doing business. According to a previous assessment by the American Chamber of Commerce, if the US engaged in a comprehensive decoupling with China, cuts off sales to China in the field of civil aviation, this would result in US output losses ranging from $38 billion to $51 billion and the loss of 167,000 to 225,000 jobs in the US civil aviation's manufacturing industry. Boeing also predicted that Chinese airlines would require 8,700 new planes worth nearly $1.5 trillion over the next 20 years. If the loss of a $37.2 billion order has caused Boeing pain, then let some American politicians continue to advocate decoupling from China and constructing a high wall against it. By then, American companies, including Boeing, will be experiencing long-term pain rather than short-term pain. Boeing has now complained about geopolitical differences affecting its operations, but China is not to blame. If there is a political factor at work here, it can only be said that the politicization of economic and trade issues in the United States has backfired. In 2021, the Biden administration agreed to settle a 17-year trade dispute between Boeing and Airbus subsidiaries to persuade European countries to jointly confront China. After Airbus received orders from Chinese airlines, American public opinion was flooded with envy. This may also remind Europe of what lies behind various ideas that the US verbally asserts, as well as Washington of the fact that political manipulations cannot, after all, triumph over market law. The most important thing for Boeing to do is not to express disappointment with China, but to argue with the US government and Congress about market laws to improve the competitiveness of its own product. But of course, Boeing is not the only company that requires this. Moreover, losing such a large market as China would be devastating for Boeing, which has been plagued by one problem after another over the last 3 years, beginning with the 737 MAX crashes and then the pandemic, which all but wiped out demand for flying and devastated the finances of its airline customers. More recently, problems with its latest model, the 787 Dreamliner, have halted deliveries. China accounted for more than 20% of Boeing's global deliveries in 2017 and 2018, but that percentage has dropped to less than 5% since 2020. Some experts believe that in the last 4 years, Boeing has reached agreements to sell some planes to Chinese airlines, either through a leasing company or through sales in which the buyer's identity is not disclosed. However, according to Richard Abulafia, an aerospace analyst with Aerodynamic Advisory, no aircraft orders are official without approval from the Chinese government, which views plane sales as leverage in its negotiations with the US on overall trade issues. We remain in active discussions with our Chinese customers on their fleet planning needs, Boeing CEO David Calhoun told investors in October. We continue to urge leaders in both countries to resolve trade differences. Analysts believe that the longer the current grounding continues, the more Boeing risks losing out on the Chinese market. Typically, an airline is hesitant to switch aircraft manufacturers because such a significant change raises the cost of pilot training and increases the cost of spare parts. However, if Chinese customers with Boeing planes switch to rival Airbus, it would be a long-term shift that would be difficult to reverse, and it would be made by the Chinese government rather than the airlines. He and other experts believe Boeing will eventually regain some sales and deliveries in China, but at a much lower level than anticipated just a few years ago. The only good news for Boeing is that China's aviation sector is not as important as experts predicted a decade ago when the market would account for 30% of all global commercial jet purchases. According to Abulafia, Chinese aviation industry was slowing even before the pandemic, falling from a 12.2% growth rate in the fourth quarter of 2018 to 5.3% a year later, just before the COVID outbreak became public. Comment your views and stay tuned for more.